And so I went to massage school really just kind of as a hobby, just to see if I liked it. And what happened was I fell in love with it. And so I went from this hardcore construction world outside with jackhammers and, you know, employees and lawsuits and all kinds of crazy things to this quiet room where we're smelling lavender oil and we're mixing different massage creams together to see which works better. And, you know, it was just such a good experience to me. I fell in love with healing as far as having contact with other people, using my hands. At first I felt great doing it. And I didn't have any idea the potential to bring about healing that Cranial Sacral had at the time. To me, I just laid on the table and it was very relaxing. I do remember at one point, like my head did this. I remember feeling my head rotate like that. After that, a lot of things started to shift for me. And I just started being healthier. I started wanting to be healthier. I had more cranial sessions. And the epiphany was this, and I share it a lot, was when I was 17 and got in this car accident, I was like in the top percentile of mathematics skills in the state I was living in. After I had that car accident, I couldn't balance my checkbook. And I didn't know I couldn't balance my checkbook. My ability to do mathematics had eluded me. So after getting some of those sessions, what I found was I was able to go back to school and I was able to do math again. I did algebra and trigonometry and calculus and all that stuff. And that's really what got me started in craniosacral therapy. It just didn't make sense. How could this man have this gentle hold on my head for an hour and 15 minutes? And first of all, have it be so disruptive that I could feel it for the next day and a half. And then for that to start this process of me really changing my life and getting healthy. And I just said, you know, that might be a good place to spend the next chunk of my life, is learning craniosacral therapy. But there's a difference between just coming in our normal state of mind and coming in contact with somebody and coming in and really settling down inside of myself and really grounding myself and feeling the fluids in my body and letting the thoughts dissipate and then finding that state and then coming in contact with a person. And we start to feel all kinds of things. And that's what I like people to experience, and that's what I like to share, is because once you feel that, it's a great place to live. Like, just to be able to experience that in our day-to-day life. But then if you're going to do any kind of healing work, to have that grounded, present state, it's just awesome. So we're going to do a little exercise, and I think maybe we'll just do that right now. We're going to settle down and go into this resource place. And then one of you can pick, whoever's number one will go first. So you'll be number one, you'll be number one, I'll have you be number one, you'll work on just being first. And you'll come in contact either with their wrist, with both hands, or their elbow. And that way, and then I just want you to keep that same quiet, centered space while you come into contact with the other person. And don't do anything. Just come in contact with them in a very gentle, easy way, and then see what you perceive. Just see how you experience it. And then, without changing any of that awareness, gently come into contact with your partner's wrist or elbow, whatever you've decided to come in contact with. Put one hand maybe above the joint, one hand below it. Make sure you're both comfortable. Get settled closer or further away, whatever you need to do to feel comfortable. And let your touch be infinitely light. When we come in contact with somebody, we're touching with our body, we're also touching with our energy, and we're also touching with our visual awareness. So as you disengage from your client's body, I want you to do it very slowly and very mindfully, so that it's not disruptive. To be able to stay in just this field right here, right now, with 7 of us in the room, like, I feel this. I find it very refreshing and very nurturing just to be around like-minded people with a loving intention to learn to do something good for the planet. Yeah. And yeah, we learn a lot about the bones, and we learn a lot about how they move normally, whatever that means, typically. We learn a lot about technique, like what fingertip goes where during what process, and what you should feel if everything's perfect. But most humans are not like textbook ideal. Lots of stuff goes on. Some of the pieces are held together with magnets, and other pieces have little tiny tabs, little plastic tabs that hold it together. But it's not a bad model, and for the price, it's pretty decent. This one is probably like the nicest one on the planet. It's all held together with magnets. And so every single bone comes apart with and can be put back together with magnets. For anybody who's interested in cranial work with any degree of seriousness, you almost have to have a cranial model, just because it's so complex to hold all this together. And just to see how the different bevels are, because see, remember, all of these bones move. These two bones, this one right here, which is called the temporal bone, which has a mate on the other side, he came up with the idea that those two bones were beveled like the gills of a fish. You ever see a fish, the way the gills actually set on the side of the neck? There's a subtle motion with these bones to where they actually inhale and exhale. Remember I talked about there's always an expansion and contraction of the body? These bones have a very minor movement. And then in the workshop, of course, we're going to break each bone down and look at the axis and see exactly how it moves, so you become very familiar with it. But it gives you an idea. So these bevels here only allow the bones to move in certain directions. So when you have your hands on somebody's cranium like this, what you're going to actually feel, I'll mimic it with this hand, is you're going to feel a widening and a narrowing of those bones because they actually hinge together. And as you get trained, you start to be able to feel what those would feel like. And of course, most of the time we're working on pretty healthy people. And after you do enough healthy people, you can really start to feel when something doesn't feel right. When you inhale, the air goes by these turbinates. They're like little, I don't know, they look like the thing on the side of an airplane. As the air goes through there, it is moisturized and cleansed. Part of that cranial sacral mechanism creates a rocking motion in all of these structures. And that rocking motion is in part because the sacrum on one end and the cranium on the other end are firmly anchored. And as that moves, it moves everything. And so that's what we call the PRM, primary respiratory motion.
It's when the sperm goes through the egg, and that part of the sperm, is that what becomes the girl?
Well, that becomes the central chain of the body. So our bodies have a central organizing principle. And when the sperm hits the egg, it creates this little, it looks like sheet lightning going through for the ovum, through the egg. Yeah. And there's pictures of it. It's beautiful, but it's just some kind of chemical, electrical, spiritual, who knows, action of the sperm hitting that egg, and it turns into this perfect sheet lightning. But it's a cone, or rather a tube would be a better word for it. And that later on turns into the neural tube in the embryo, which then turns into basically the spinal cord in the adult. And so there's 3 layers of tissue: endoderm, ectoderm, and mesoderm. And those are really, everything in your body eventually becomes a derivative of one of those 3 things. Wow. It's pretty fascinating. And so one of the, I don't want to say advanced concepts, so one of the concepts in cranial work is that when you come into relationship with something, is you can treat it on an embryological level. And that sounds really woo-woo, right? But I mean, if you had just 3 colors on a board, you could make 1,000 different colors out of those 3 primary colors, right? Well, I don't know how many, but a lot. Yeah. So it's a very similar concept. Yeah. So all of a sudden your hair has been derived from something, your eyelashes derived from something, your tooth's derived from something, your kidneys derived from something, your ovaries derived from something, but they all started with those 3 initial layers. So all of a sudden somebody comes in, they've been everywhere, they've tried everything, they still, every time they eat, sometimes they get sick, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're gassy, sometimes they're not. They've taken every digestive aid on the planet, they've had all their hormones checked, on and on and on. And then you treat them, and they come back and go, you know what, I went for 3 days after I saw you last time, and I didn't have that problem, let's try it again. And then you treat them, and they go 10 days maybe without having that problem. And so by working with the cranial system and all the nerves as they exit the spine, remember we showed you all those nerve roots over here, you're actually having an influence on everything that those nerves go to. But the reality is, once you figure out how to bring yourself into a practitioner neutral, how to come into relationship with another person, and then how to help bring their body into a state of balance and neutral, their nervous system, that inherent perfection inside their body, does all the work. We don't do it. The stiller I become, the more aware I am, and the more I can perceive. Let your energy subtly mingle with the people around you. So as the therapists that are on the feet are ready, you can gently and carefully bring your hands up and in contact with the person on the table, their ankles or their feet or their lower leg, whatever feels right. Keep settling into your fulcrums. The stiller you become, the more you can perceive.
It was so interesting.
Yeah. Remember we were talking about the parasympathetic nervous system?
Yeah.
The rest and digest phase of
Oh,
it?
it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I've never been aware of that before. Have you? Like that?
I never heard it like that.
It was so interesting.
Sweet. Just coming in contact with somebody and that relationship starts the change taking place.
Yeah.
But yeah, like through the course of the training, you get much more sophisticated. Like you're a little exact in your hand placement. You're a little more exact in your intention about what we're working with. You start to be able to differentiate all of those different rhythmic patterns that are going on in the body simultaneously. The idea in cranial work is that we as practitioners maintain a state of neutral. So we're not really getting into the process. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're not hopping into the process. On the other hand, we're not avoiding the process. So it is a skill, Darby, to develop this, right? So it's that perfect balance. That's the art of it. Like, we don't want to jump on the train and go for a ride out of town. We just want to be with the train. On the other hand, we don't want to have any fear or concern or rejection or any of that energy either, where we feel like, well, I'm getting too close, I need to get back. Right. So that's a delicate balance. And so the word we use is practitioner neutral. So we hold a state of neutral. And if I were to break all of cranial sacral therapy into 3 categories, which I did, it's practitioner presence, which is part of what we're talking about, anatomy, and then the actual skill set, right? How do I come in contact with something? Which bones do I put my fingertips on? How do I hold the sacrum and the occiput and slightly those are technique-y kind of things. Mm-hmm. Those are skills. So it's practitioner presence, anatomy, and skills. And really, they're pretty evenly weighted, but I would say practitioner presence is the biggest one. It's going to be a 6-month training, starts in August for 2 days. It's going to be a Saturday and Sunday. 2 days August, 2 days September, 2 days October, 2 days November, skipping December, 2 days in January, 2 days in February. They will be fairly long days. I have not quite decided how I'm going to go about doing that. Roughly 9 to 5. In addition to that, there will be some suggestions. You don't have to do these, but the suggestion is that you receive at least 1 session per month from a qualified practitioner, and we can talk about what that means. Also, the suggestion is that you give at least 1 session, well, a total of 3 per month. So let's say 1 week you get a session, the other 3 weeks you give sessions. I'd love for that to just be totally on a learning, free donation basis. And the reason I say that is it takes the pressure off everybody. And there will be a suggestion of a certain amount of home study. It depends on how we slice it up, but somewhere between 2 and 4 hours a month of home study. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so there will be a certain amount of hours that will be, you don't have to do it, but in order to get the 120 hour certification,
you need to have that stuff written down and validated and confirmed. So that's what ends up making up the difference in hours, so those few every month. We'll go in way more in depth in anatomy. We'll go way more in depth in the palpation skills. And we'll go way more in depth in practitioner presence, like how we center ourselves. And the other suggestion is that you have a good anatomy book. I love knitters, but it doesn't have to be knitters. And there may even be a newer version than this. This is about 1.5 years old. So this is knitters. Those slides I showed online, that's what this is from. So we have the knitters book. And then also, I think it's really important if you're going to do it with any degree of seriousness is to get a model skull. Well, I got to tell you, I think this worked out perfectly today. You know, when you set up something like this, you never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to show up. It's always kind of a trust in God and just show up and roll with what happens. But the 6 of you were awesome. Very coherent, very informed, very open-minded, and it's just been an awesome experience for me. So
It was beautiful.
yeah, thank you. I'm glad you made it in here.